Hello, hello, hello. I am back once again. Today I am not sure what to talk about. I could keep talking about environmentalism, but I feel like I really have just wringed out that towel. And it's getting a little boring. I think this time I'll talk about politics, because everyone can get agitated about politics. I believe that Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs were stupid. Now, mind you, the steel and aluminum tariffs are different from the tariffs that were placed in retaliation to China's economic policies. Those two things are very different. Steel and aluminum tariffs, if you recall, were put in place to quote, for national security purposes. So they're very different. The policies were put in place to help steel and aluminum workers to be able to maintain their livelihoods here in the U.S. And it's mostly in response to cheap steel and aluminum from abroad, be that from China, Germany, and a few other primary sources, I believe. And so the tariffs were to basically stop the importation of cheaper steel. The reason why I think this is stupid is because the economic impact of a tariff generally has greater ramifications than its intended goal. This can be seen by how General Motors, pretty sure it's General Motors, decided to close or wanted to close 5 of its manufacturing plants here in the U.S. Shortly after the bill was put in place, because they couldn't get the steel and aluminum to keep building their cars, because ultimately the cost of importing it would have still been less than buying it from in the state, but they would probably be able to just go to a different country, build the parts there, and then ship them here for even cheaper. So that's what I mean by there's greater ramifications. You can save one or two plants, steel and aluminum plants, at the cost of 5 plants that actually use that material. That's why tariffs are stupid. I can see why he wanted to put that in place, because ultimately it doesn't cost anything to actually, or it doesn't cost much to put a tariff in place by comparison to a, a subsidy. A subsidy would have been my solution to the problem, wherein if it really is a national security issue, you would take like $1 or $2 billion from the military budget, and then turn that into grants for steel and aluminum manufacturing places. That way they can use that money to either pay their workers, pay or acquire new capital, or otherwise to research a new development technology that'll be able to put them ahead of the other foreign countries, and thereby making their material cheaper. That's why I believe it's stupid. The steel and aluminum tariffs were really good at pissing off the rest of the world, and kind of catching the anger of the World Trade Organization. And true, the WTO itself didn't actually do anything, but when one country does that, every other country now has a right to do it. So that's what I mean. And that's how it became a problem. And having actually created subsidies for steel and aluminum workers would have been a much more of a permanent solution in a way. Since steel and aluminum tariffs, you won't really notice their effect until a few years down the line, assuming they've been kept in place that long, as well as the effects of the tariff being put in place. The economic effects of a tariff are really hard to quantify until a few years after they've been put in place. And even then, they're really good at hyping up support and morale for politicians and civilians, but it isn't really effective in terms of an economic solution to a problem, since basically it gives the domestic workers more of a reason to not innovate and instead depend on those resources of stopping competition. As you probably have heard once before, the mother of invention is necessity, and if companies don't have the necessity to lower their prices to match competition, then they won't invent new ways to combat that competition. So it's a odd conundrum that the workers are put in, or the companies are put in. So yeah, I don't really know. But what I do know is that it would have been better for the world if we had just put in more subsidies. Especially since we're already calling it a national defense thing, or national security maneuver. So to me, it should already just be put in with the military budget. It's $2 billion. That's less than 0.2%, I think. Because 2% of 100 billion would be 2 billion. And then divide that by 6, because there's $6 billion that's usually contributed to the military. So, yeah, it'd be a very small percentage. Because 2% divided by 6, yeah, that's really small. Sorry, I'm in the car and I don't actually feel like doing math. You'll have to excuse me for that.